Welcome, everyone. New faces, returning faces. Great to see you all again. Today's topic is succession planning. So, building a healthy bench builds management depth, improves employee retention and motivation, and reduces organizational risk. Yet, how is it that it's so challenging to actually implement successfully? To kick us off, we have Randall Craig, CEO at the Brain Trust, share a few ideas, then we flip into Q&A from me, from you. First, a little bit about Randall. He has founded several successful startups. He's held a long-time position at a Big Four consulting firm. He was a senior executive at an American public company. He's the author of 8 books. He's in the Speaker Hall of Fame, a master facilitator. He's helped over 100 organizations scale, and he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, helping organizations grow their businesses with executive coaching, leadership retreats, and facilitating conversations to align teams. Randall, start us off. What are the key things we need to think about when it comes to succession planning?
I think the biggest question really is why do we really care? Why is it important? And certainly as organizations grow, and I know there's some people here that are connected with very small organizations, some medium, some large. I know some of our clients are also multinationals. It's the same thing at all of them, except for you start to think about it as the organization becomes a little bit bigger and a little bit more complex and everything. So why do you care? Succession planning, it minimizes risk. It boosts people's ability to prepare, reduces turnover. It provides a clear career path. It's a way to institutionalize knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer. It offers a more structured leadership approach. There's a whole bunch of other reasons of why we want to do it. And so, I'm sure everyone can Google what is succession planning. Well, I Googled it too because I figured that, it's a strategic, and of course, I don't have the actual definition right in front of me because I'm paying attention to everyone here, but it's the strategic identification of key roles in people and the strategic planning on how to de-risk the organization by allowing a career path and a transition plan to everyone's eventual replacement. And it sounds kind of ominous. Everyone's eventual replacement, people leave for a bunch of reasons. They retire. They move on to other opportunities outside the organization. They get sick and have to leave their role unexpectedly. Another division happens. There's a merger, an acquisition, a divestiture. There's all kinds of reasons why people move on. They get promoted to another role. They take a sabbatical. There's all these different reasons. So the question is, do we handle it, for example, strategically? Are we trying to get ahead of the curve? Are we going to handle it opportunistically? Like, oh, this is going to happen. Who's next? We got to do some quick running around and trying to figure that one out. Or do we handle it reactively, which is, uh-oh, somebody's just left. We got to fill in the blank. Oh, who are we going to have to quickly backstop and sort of take on that role? So we all have a choice, certainly as leaders, as at the board level, how do we want to actually do this succession planning? Is it opportunistically? Is it reactively, or is it strategically? And so hopefully today we'll have a chance to talk through a number of different strategic reasons and why and how. Number one. And number two, we'll also have a chance to brainstorm and share a little bit, at least from our perspective. Here's some, innovative and creative ways to sort of help make that knowledge transfer happen. And I'm looking forward to having that conversation. I should also say, if we think about who we want to do succession planning for, in the perfect organization where there's a lot of time and a lot of money, okay, we do it for every single role. Individuals have got a career path that sort of moves them up the organization or moves them across to the kind of roles that they want for their career. And the organization has got a certain desire to actually make sure that there's no surprises along the way. So the who question at the very beginning for me anyway is to achieve what's in the strategic plan. What are the roles that are critical to actually helping make that happen? It could be a lot of leadership positions. It could be a lot of positions where there's some very, very specialized skills, whether it's technical or technological or whether it's in sales or technical or support or whatever it is, what are the very specific skills that are suddenly very important? Certainly for organizations that are in the growth startup scale up, it might be financial and capital market skills and so on. We don't really know. Every organization is different, but a specialized skills or leadership, anything that helps the strategic plan. If you're doing really well, you'll have a lighter duty version of that for the next layer as well. The goal here, more than anything else, is to say, how do we be more strategic about what that talent pipeline actually is? So those are my opening comments. I've got a whole bunch of other ideas and everything, Rania, but why don't we just start with some of the questions uh, and see where that takes us?
Sure thing. So for everyone here, this hour is yours. Randall and I work on all kinds of projects. We pick these topics, and I have my own questions that I don't get the chance to talk to Randall about. So I brainstorm my own questions. Randall has no idea what they are. You'll get priority, but I can start with my questions to get things rolling. Randall, it is very common for companies to not have ironed out their break for use in case of emergency succession plan. If this includes anybody here, you're not alone. We see this with organizations of any size, including huge, multinational billion-dollar companies. So putting aside, our own individual fears of mortality or the fear of having uncomfortable conversations, leaders may well fear that putting together those succession planning conversations includes themselves and will make them feel less vital and less ensconced within their organizations. Like, what can be done to normalize succession planning with the people at the top?
Yeah. So most of the people, the more sophisticated the organization, the more sophisticated the leaders generally are. And I have seen, of course, cases where it's the opposite, but I think part of it is to help people recognize that you know, as an individual, what is your career path? And to have those conversations, the performance appraisal and objective setting process, if it doesn't have that segment on career planning to get an idea of what that individual is interested in doing, it may very well be that they decide to do that thing, whatever it is, outside of the organization and leave, thereby exacerbating what might have been a problem that could have been easily solved. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is okay, well, you know what? If you work very hard to replace yourself, and I've certainly had some of my mentors and senior leaders when I was sort of, going up through the ranks, basically share that, my job is to make sure that I don't have a job, to make sure that I'm useless because it doesn't need me to be doing my job. Because if I take that attitude, I'll have several different people underneath me or outside in another division or group, for example, that consider step into my role. That means that I'm now free to go to that next level, whatever that happens to be, right? So I think that destigmatizing, Rania, to use that word, it's really more of a question to have the career planning conversations to get an idea. And that makes it easier for somebody else to say, listen, I don't need to hold on to this particular role. There are places for me that I'm interested that perhaps I could work with the organization to say, okay, I'd like to move over there, right? A CFO who wants to run a division and be the COO or CEO of a division, for example. That's an interesting thing. That's an interesting career path. If you don't have the conversation, you don't have an idea what they kind of like to do, right? And then it's a question of say, how do we do that knowledge transfer? And I'll have a lot more to say about that, right? Um,
Clarine, I see your little hand up.
Yeah, I'm actually in that other position where I am the executive director of a very small association where there's only 5.5 FTEs in the whole organization. But I'm also looking to retire in the next few years, and I've I've hired somebody that I feel is very competent and but needs a lot of learning. I have two concerns. One is I don't know how long it sort of takes to bring somebody up into this level. They're kind of more of they have some HR background, so they have some corporate background. They don't have a lot of the other pieces. So part of it's timing, and the other part of it is, I guess it sort of feels like I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. And it's like, what if, that doesn't work out and they leave after, you're trying to do all this development for them.
yeah, Karine, that's just a great question because, in your particular case, a very, very small organization, the pool of potential people who could step into your role is very, very small. Of course, there's also a big pool outside, right? So that's half of my answer to you. You have to have more than just a plan A. What's the plan B? What if that person got hit by a truck and suddenly was no longer available to do the work? Right? What if for whatever reason you decided to work for the next 30 years and never retire, right? And that person goes away. Like I'm just saying that this, but the question you ask is the same one that the medium-sized, 100 employee, 500 employee, 1,000 employee groups ask, how do I do that knowledge transfer? You know, and so let me give you some ideas. Obviously, mentorship. You spend some time mentoring, but does the mentor need to be you? Right? That's one thing. Number two is coaching, right? And I'm not talking about you as the coaching full leader, which is doing some mentoring, but hire somebody. I'm serious about getting you up to speed. You tell that person, we're going to actually make an investment in you. We're putting skin in the game. You've got to up level yourself to do your part when we're doing our part. And so you get them a coach. And that puts some external pressure on them, but also like positive pressure, right? The reason why you've got this coach is to teach you how to do that job of as executive director and bringing in new things. Because that person, if they're good, they'll have some ideas, right? But they'll be very um, there'll be early form. There won't be the confidence or the knowledge base to sort of help actually execute them yet, right? And if it's always you who's doing it, that doesn't give them the elbow room, if you will, to grow. So that's where that coach comes in. So that's another idea. For larger organizations, you can do cohort-based training. So, for example, if you're a very, very large organization, there might be people in a certain type of role in different divisions or different geographies, etc. Or if you're a medium-sized or large organization, maybe there's a group of 5 or 10 or 30, I don't know what the number is, where you decide to do cohort-based training, where you're getting a whole group of people to get ready to the next level. Interestingly, very, very early in my career, I was at KPMG, the management consulting accounting advisory firm. And I remember I was promoted to manager, which is a big thing. So guess what? They took all the people who were being promoted because everyone gets promoted like at the same time of year, and they put us away for a week of training, like a call it a 5-day retreat. We don't do those things anymore nowadays. We can do a retreat in 2 3 days, etc. Okay. When I was promoted to senior manager, like a year or so later, guess what? Away you go for senior management training. It's not reasonable to expect people to suddenly have the skills for that next level unless you actually say, look at that. Okay. And the interesting thing, and Corinne, this might not be the case in your situation. The interesting thing is that if you've got a group of people who are either high potentials or a certain role, new in a certain role, or whatever it is, and you do training, um, everyone builds relationships. They develop a common language. You could reinforce certain cultural norms, right? And so that way, when they come back, it's not just them, the new manager, or them, the new executive director or partner, or whatever the particular role is. It's them who now has a better understanding as to how to do that job. They've been upskilled in a certain way. What else? There's one other thing that you can do. Actually, there's a lot more. You can assign them special projects, right? Projects that you might have done, but these are ones that are stretch goals for them so that they can prove to themselves and to you that they are doing stuff at a certain level. Now, if you're a smaller organization and you're looking to replace yourself as the executive director or president or founder, whatever it is, you may have a board of directors who has to vet the choices. And so part of the succession planning role is communications up, not just activities and investments down. You've got to be able to say, over the last 18 months, we've given them these very specific special projects, and they were able to demonstrate competence and innovation by delivering all of these projects very successfully. And at a certain point, the board will be able to say, yes, indeed, that is evidence that they can do that job. It's not certainty, right? But it's more evidence rather than just you saying, I trust them, they're good, right? Part of it also, since we're talking about the board, is how do you put them in a position where they can demonstrate their abilities at that level to the board? So this, if you've decided that you've got the successor, or if you've got two or three potential successors, etc., what can you do to give them some board exposure, at the right time, so the board can sort of see them in action, right? The other thing that you might want to think about is, before you have any of these conversations with a potential successor, is to try some of these things to test drive whether they might have it in them, right? A certain special project, or a certain type of training, etc., or a certain type of, I don't know, whatever the task is. Okay, and if they're able to step up and they're able to demonstrate that ability to learn, you could see demonstration of their leadership in action. Then you could say, okay, in that particular case, yeah, I think that person might be on the list of potential candidates. So, boy, that was a short question, but it was a great one because there's so many different ideas that came from it. I think though it's very naive. If you think that magically that you see there's a pool of potential successors, that gee, that's all that's kind of needed. And if I can sort of just opine a little later, I'm sorry for taking up some of the question time, but if I can opine for a little, just a few more minutes, what what is that succession process? If you were to say, we're very big on frameworks here at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, what is the framework that you might say? And yeah, you can Google, here's the 10-step process, and here's the 4-step and the 5-step and all that kind of stuff. It boils down to this. It's very simple. What are the key roles? What's critical? Where are the vulnerable positions that maybe somebody may retire, they've got some specialist knowledge or whatever. What are the skills in those particular roles? We're not talking about the people now, we're talking about the roles. What are the skills in those particular roles that are needed to succeed in those particular roles? The skills that are needed, for example, for a CFO are very different than for a president or executive director. A head of research and development, very different, right? The head of risk for an insurance company is very different than the head of marketing for an insurance company, let's just say. So what are the skills? If you, in a certain sense, I'm not talking about the job description, although it can be derived from there. What are the critical skills that you need to look for? And then the question is, what is the talent pipeline? Who can be developed to actually fill that particular role based on those particular skills that are needed? And it's kind of almost like two intersections. On one hand, what are the skills? What do we need? And the other is, what are they interested in? Because if somebody is not interested in moving up over here, but they would be interested to go over there, then you don't want to waste their time and yours, training them up, if you will, getting them ready to be one of those candidates to succeed. So, who are the potential successors? We always think internally. There's some benefit because they understand the company, they've got the relationships, they might have some history, so they understand kind of what's happened in the past and everything. They know the industry, etc. But there's also external candidates. And the smaller the organization, while it's very good to think about, promotion from within for a million reasons, it's more likely that the smaller the organization, the more you might look outside, just because there may not be enough bench strength to say, okay, there are some very specific people that might succeed in that. For example, somebody in charge of budgeting, you might want them to be a CPA. Well, we don't have any other CPAs on staff. You have to go outside, right? Also say, the whole question of and I don't want to use the word DEI because it's got a bit of for some people there's some stigma to it, and for others it's the absolute. But I do want to speak very briefly. If we're thinking about recruiting for a particular role outside, or making sure that there's the talent pool of potential successors, we want to make sure that we're looking in all the places to make sure that we've got the best candidate for that particular job, wherever they are. And so I'm not saying it's a question of quotas, etc., but we need to make sure that we're not ignoring excellent candidates just because we're not fishing in all the right ponds, right? So let's just make sure that we fish in the right ponds, and if we're looking for external, because that way, we'll make sure that the best successor eventually succeeds. So fine, we've got the pool of potential successors. The next is really the question of knowledge transfer and upskilling. And I say those two things separately because knowledge transfer is very simple. Knowledge is transferred from the person who's doing the job to the person who's going to be doing the job or potentially doing the job. Upskilling is something that can happen inside the organization. It can happen outside the organization. So the question is, what's the upskilling and knowledge transfer plan? Notice the word plan, and it's not a four-letter word, even though it is one. Um, the reason why I say that is because um, for here, it's a very individualized thing. If you've got two or if you've got three potential successors for one of these critical roles, each person will have certain strengths and certain, I don't want to say blind spots, but they just haven't had the experiences yet in a particular area. So the upskilling and knowledge transfer plan includes saying that for person X, we need to find a way to give them some experiences in this area and this area. The next person, we need to give them experiences in this area and that area, right? And not only does that help build the internal confidence and internal network and relationships and everything, but what it also does, it helps you demonstrate and help prove the case for the fact that they might be still, a potential successor. Most importantly, though, it broadens their base. So that's that, and then finally monitoring, and so fine, it's good to put in and the plan, by the way, it's not like a 30-page thing. It's like a small number of bullets. That's all it is, right? Is to say, okay, let's see how we're doing, right? So, for example, if you're doing mentorship as part of your plan, right, and maybe you're the mentor, maybe that's somebody else on the mentor who's mentoring them, okay, you want to just do a touch base. Maybe every quarter, for example, you have that conversation, which is, okay, how's it going, right? And tell me what you've learned in here and there. And it's a good conversation, but it's also for you to sit back as the leader and say, okay, is this person developing the way that we need this person to develop to remain a potential successor, right? And finally, sort of enveloping the whole thing is communication, right? Communication to the potential successors, the communication, for example, if you've got a cohort, that you're doing that communication up to the board or to whoever it is that sort of oversees it. And I think that's kind of a process. I know I've been talking a long time on it, but it's not exactly rocket science. But sometimes people jump immediately to, okay, we got to work with this one person to do a bunch of stuff, and boy, I've got to sort of download and download and download. You don't need to do it all yourself, right? There's external coaches, okay. There's external training, okay. There's things that you can do internally, okay. If you've got a coach, they could suggest some of the things. We do retreats, for example. One of the things we do is corporate retreats. And what if, for example, even though they might not have the title, what if, for example, you invited some of the people who are potential successors for these key roles into the executive retreat? Give them a role of one sort or the other. We can come up with a bunch of different things, right? And that way they get to sort of see how that inner sanctum works, right? They might present something, they might facilitate something, but we can get them involved in a way that once again gives them experiences that makes them more likely to be successful. Certainly when we coach people, I don't want to say it's a great surprise, but most people are excited about the process, right? And because they see that the organization is truly taking an interest in their success, as opposed to many where the question of loyalty is one that is openly discussed. So my God, I hope that was a big, 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 big question. So we need more questions, okay? Unless me talking.
I think Corinne's question is really important and speaks to a real fear reality that everybody faces when thinking about succession planning, which is, in her words, you invest in this person, and what if they take off? And it's not to say they're not loyal or the best fit, but there are other opportunities. It's a big world out there, right? Or even personal things happen in their lives. Randall, you and I worked with a client recently. They're working in different geographies, and in some of the geographies, it is almost impossible to find talent. And one of the employees told us that they have in their contract, they have to give 12 months notice if they want to leave. And another, this is not in Canada, I don't know what the laws here are in Canada, but another employee in that company said it says they have to give 6 months notice. I'm not a lawyer here, but is that something you can sort of make clear with your employees that like if we're going to onboard you, it's going to take time, and to offboard you will take time? Like you have to give us like time to train the next person in.
Yeah, I know every country's got different laws, and there's also different standards, right? But let me ask everyone who's here, everyone who's listening to the recording, um, have you ever seen anybody in your office who's the Walking Dead? They've kind of checked out already. They're not really doing their work, but they're cashing their paycheck and they're punching in their time clock, if you will, but they're checked out, right? And I think that the problem with the long-term sort of notice things, and I know at different jurisdictions there's different things. Um, you know, if you want somebody to check out, okay, you're going to hold firm to that kind of thing. And I think the reason why, they're required to sign is because it's just so hard to recruit. I would flip it around a little bit and say, okay, if we can't, for example, find somebody in our jurisdiction with this particular skill, maybe it's a smaller jurisdiction where there's no education or there's no other big competitors, whatever it happens to be. Is there a way to put in place a corporate program where there's geographic rotations? Is it possible, for example, that for the high potentials, there may be um, secondments? So somebody goes somewhere for 3 months to do something, to take over somebody else's job, right? And that person, for example, goes off to do something else, right? And so therefore, it's not a question of saying, well, how do we just deal with retention, and how do we deal with engagement? But how do we also, wearing our succession planning hats for a moment, how do we give people different experiences so that they suddenly can become candidates for that much more senior role? I don't think we're going to be able to solve the world's problems in every jurisdiction because there's just no talent to be found. Sometimes you've got to import it from somewhere else, right? And look externally. It's a real challenge. And so, I know the client you're talking about. It's just, part of how you deal with it, right? So.
Corrine, does that give you enough food for thought to clarify things, or do you want us to lean in a different direction one way or the other?
I think that's good. I guess I was thinking my second part was kind of like, what is that time frame?
So let me deal with the time frame question from a different perspective.
With that, we'll break here on part one on succession planning. We'll pick up with more Q&A in part two. If any of the things we talked about so far resonates with you, if you're curious about our perspective on succession planning or any other business growth strategies, do reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation and share resources. You can reach us at info@randallcraig.com or book a call at www.randallcraig.net/30, and we'll see you back for part two.